All right, let's dive right in. What if the rise and fall of the world's greatest powers wasn't random at all? What if it followed a predictable, almost scripted pattern that's been repeating for 600 years? Well, that's the pretty wild idea we're digging into today, based on a source that claims to have cracked this very code. So, the source starts with this incredibly bold claim. It's basically saying that history has a built in kill switch for every single dominant currency. And we're not just talking about a bad recession here. Nope. This is a fundamental cycle of creation and, well, destruction that, according to this theory, no empire has ever managed to escape. Okay, but this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. The whole point, the source argues, is that this ancient pattern is playing out right now. And that brings us to the big central question for us today. Is the US dollar, the bedrock of the entire global economy? Is it just the latest character in a very, very old play? So, to really get a handle on this prediction, we've got to look at the engine driving it all. And that's this 7-stage life cycle. It supposedly maps out the entire journey of any currency that's ever made it to the top, right from its birth to, well, its inevitable fall. Okay, so here's the journey. It all starts with a country becoming dominant in both military power and trade. That leads to these massive trade surpluses, right? All this cash is flowing in. Eventually, that power gets locked in, it's formalized, and bam, its currency becomes the world's reserve. But then, and this is the key part, the model says the rot starts to set in. You get deficit spending, then currency debasement, then a loss of confidence from the rest of the world, and finally, replacement and collapse. And that reserve currency status? That's the ultimate prize in this whole global economic game. I mean, it's not just about having a strong currency. It's about having the currency that everybody else has to use to trade, to buy oil, to save. It's like controlling the world's financial oxygen supply. It's that big of a deal. And having that power comes with what's called the exorbitant privilege. And honestly, it's the ultimate economic cheat code. It means you can buy real stuff from other countries. Cars, phones, oil, and pay for it with money you can literally just print. It's like having a global credit card with no limit. A perk that, no one else on the planet gets. Okay, so that's the theory in a nutshell. But the big question is, does it actually hold up when you look at history? Well, the source puts its own model to the test by taking a look back at the ghosts of empires past. And this is where it gets really interesting. Take a look at the lifespans of the last 3 world reserve currencies before the dollar. You've got the Portuguese real lasting about 80 years, the Dutch guilder, again, about 80 years, then the British pound, a bit longer, around 105 years. The consistency there, it's kind of striking, right? It's a surprisingly regular beat. And for each one of these empires, the source ties their rise directly back to stage 1, raw military power. The argument is simple. You can't have the world's money if you don't control the world's shipping lanes. Portugal had cannons on their ships. The Netherlands had the Dutch East India Company, which was basically a corporation with its own army. And of course, Britain had the Royal Navy, which controlled pretty much every major trade choke point on the planet. It's a pretty stark reminder that, historically, global finance has been built on a foundation of pure force. All right, so let's fast forward to today. How does this whole historical model apply to the US dollar? Well, the argument is that it's the exact same script playing out all over again, just, with bigger players and way higher stakes. According to the source, 1944, that's the year, that's the moment the dollar was officially crowned king. The Bretton Woods Agreement is presented as the clear entry into stage 3. This is when 44 countries all agreed to tie their currencies to the US dollar, making it the undisputed center of the financial universe. So the source lays it out like this. The US followed the script perfectly. Right after World War II, it had total military control of the oceans. That's stage 1. From then until about 1970, it ran huge trade surpluses, stage 2. We just saw Bretton Woods in 44, that's stage 3, making it all official. But then you get to 1971, and that's the big turning point. The US trade balance flips, it goes into a permanent deficit, and the country starts living beyond its means. Welcome to stage 4. The next major milestone in this model is 2008. The financial crisis is flagged as the moment the US officially entered stage 5. Why? Because that's when, to handle the massive debt crisis, the money printers were turned on like never before. And that, in the model's terms, is the very definition of currency debasement. And the scale of that debasement is just
staggering. Just look at this number. We're talking about roughly 10.5 trillion new dollars created between 2008 and 2022. Now, of course, this was an emergency response to save the entire financial system, but according to this historical model, it's an action that has unavoidable long-term consequences for the value of that money.
So, what's the result? Well, the model predicts something very clear and very unavoidable. Your money just doesn't go as far. That huge spike in inflation that we all felt, in 2021, 2022, from this perspective, that wasn't a shock. It was the direct, predictable outcome of these stage 5 policies. It's simple math, right? More dollars chasing the same amount of stuff means every single dollar buys a little bit less. And it's this very debasement, the source argues, that kicks off the beginning of the end. Think about it. If you're another country and you see that the dollars you saved up are losing their value, what do? You start looking for a safer place to park your wealth. And that erosion of trust, that's what stage 6 is all about. This chart really visualizes what that looks like in the real world. You can see the US dollar's share of global reserves has been slowly but steadily declining. I mean, back in 2000, it was 72%. Now it's down to 58%. It's not some dramatic overnight collapse. It's more like a slow, persistent drip, 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 as central banks around the world quietly move their money elsewhere. And you've probably seen the headlines that the source points to as concrete evidence of this shift. You hear about the BRICS nations talking about a new currency for trade, Saudi Arabia starting to accept Chinese yuan for oil, central banks buying up gold at record rates, all these nations making side deals to trade without using the dollar. These aren't just random news stories. They're presented as symptoms of a world that is actively trying to build a financial system that doesn't have the dollar at its center. So all of this leads us to the final and maybe the most important stage of the whole cycle, stage 7, the search for an alternative. If the dollar's dominance really is fading, what on earth could possibly take its place? In the past, these transitions were kind of like a royal succession. There was always a clear heir ready to take the throne. The pound took over from the guilder, the dollar took over from the pound. But the source argues that today it's totally different. It's more like a chaotic power vacuum. There is no single obvious replacement for the dollar. And that could make this whole transition, well, a lot messier than anything we've seen in history. And here's why. Unlike those past empires, the dollar isn't just a currency. It's woven into the very fabric of the entire global system. I mean, trillions in debt are priced in dollars. Global trade pretty much runs on dollars. Trying to untangle that, it's not going to be simple. The prediction here is for a messy, unstable, and probably pretty economically painful transition as the world tries to figure out what's next. And this chart, this really brings the whole argument full circle. If you look at the lifespan of past reserve currencies, 80 years, 105 years, well, as of 2025, the US dollar has been on top for 81 years. That puts it right in the historical danger zone. The implication is pretty clear, right? If you believe the pattern, the clock is ticking. Ultimately, the core argument of this whole model is that this isn't about politics or American exceptionalism or anything like that. It's just about math. The idea is that any empire, past, present, or future, that runs huge deficits and pays for them by printing money will eventually, inevitably, face the same mathematical consequences. It's a numbers game. And so the source leaves us with one final powerful question. It takes this whole thing from the world of abstract history and geopolitics and makes it incredibly personal. The question is this: if history really is a guide, and this 600-year-old script is real, what does that mean for the wealth you're holding right now in a currency that might just be following that very script?